Okay.
I don't know if it's going to record in my side as well, but let's do that.
Well, we are live. And we were just discussing if we can do local recording or not. And I'm seeing a recording icon on the right. So I'm assuming we're good. So I love it when a live stream goes live while we are still discussing. It's kind of part of the game, I guess. So welcome everybody. This is yet another Unpack the Stack. And today's stack is going to be really fun. It has to do with gaming and gamepads. And you know what? Maybe not. So my guest is Harshil. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna be super bad with your with your name anyway. So why don't you say who you are, your proper name, and then also what you do?
Right, sure. First of all, thank you for having me. My name
Sure.
is Harshil, and I work as a developer advocate at Contentful. For the folks who don't know about Contentful, Contentful is a composable content platform with an API first architecture. But we are not going to talk about Contentful on this stream, so I'm just going to spare you for that. Uh, I do a lot of crazy things. I love experimenting a lot with different kind of technologies, and today, that's something that we're going to talk about, like one of my crazy experiments with game
Nice.
controllers and web applications.
Yeah, that's the thing. I kind of like you said what contentful is, and a lot of people know what contentful is, right? And I somehow tripped over your how you explained it, like it's a composable, like all the words. I have opinions and I want to go into it, but that's not today.
Yeah.
But thank you for saying it like that because that sounds like a bit of a rebrand from recent times. So I like that. Anyways, no matter what. So you're doing crazy projects. I like crazy projects. I'm doing a few on my own as well, where I control my guitar sound with MIDI through a browser, like all this stuff. And so, what is your crazy project that you want to talk about?
So I recently came across a browser API called WebHID.
Hmm.
And this API basically allows you to connect any HID that is a human interface device with your web
Yeah,
applications. So it's like I have a PS5 laying around. I have a controller which I'm hardly using. So why not, try to have fun with that and add it to the web applications and try to create a
sure.
web game, right? So that's a
First of
crazy
all,
little project.
who who has a PlayStation 5 laying around? What's happening here? What does that exactly mean?
It means that you buy a PS5 at a flash sale when it's almost too difficult to buy one, and then you don't play games on that. Rather,
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
use it to watch Netflix.
Yeah. So it's a case of real life happens sometimes. And then you
True.
just go along. I love that.
True.
That's awesome. All right. So you're using this controller to kind of do something on the web. And so
True.
is there like maybe a demo you can show us or you want to describe it? What's the thing? How should we do it?
Sure. So I have like two kind of games. One is still a work in progress. The other is a fork that I just cloned it and I implemented the controller over here. So I'm gonna
Hmm.
try to share my screen.
Yeah, sure. Let's have a look. I'm really excited now. Like these kind of things are always so fun. I'm gonna have a few
Yeah.
questions on how it was built soon.
We're gonna look into that as well.
Yeah, great. Like generally on these unpack the stack streams, I just want to go into the nitty gritty and really like look at these code lines and see what that does. So let me know when you're able to share your screen. I'll just put it
All
on.
right, I will have to unfortunately restart my browser.
Oh, it's one of
I'll be
those
back.
MacBooks.
Yeah,
That's all good. We will be here.
I'll just take a few
Just
minutes.
yeah, of course. Remember the URL, and you'll be back
Yeah,
soon. And then I'll just monologue it somehow. We'll be fine.
I'll be back.
Sure, 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 sure. So I think this always happens, right? When you have a new Mac or something, or you have never shared your screen with Chrome, it's good for security, but then you have to restart the browser, turn on some things. So I'm actually quite excited to see what Harshal has built because generally making a game in a browser, it's not super easy, I imagine, because you have this game loop that has to run 60 frames per second, and then in that loop things need to happen. And if you don't really pay attention to how complicated that could be, performance could be horrific. And so I haven't actually seen what he's made, so we've kept that away, so it's nice for the stream. And so next to that, I kind of want to see if it's like maybe Commander Keen style, like I'm dating myself here, or like whatever. Right? I'm really excited, and he is back.
Hello. Okay, now this should work.
Let's see.
If I do the... Oh, right.
We're closing in.
Present screen.
So
Okay. Now
yes.
this is the snake game, which I'm not going to show right now because it's
Okay.
kind of fully complete. So it's good to show
So
the
we're
good stuff
now.
at the end.
Okay, so let's see a little bit of like your process and what you're doing here, and maybe a bit of a demo in a browser to see what's up with this.
Says the live server is connected. All right. So this is a simple Mario game that I have created. Now, as you can see,
Mario,
whenever you
nice.
work with Web HID, because of security
Mhm.
reasons, you always need to ask the user for the permission to connect the controller. So here is the simple connect button.
Yeah.
It gives me an option to connect it to a DualSense wireless controller. I'm gonna connect it, and now the game loads. It's pretty simple,
Whoa.
nothing fancy
This already
happens.
looks iconic to me.
I can just move Mario back and forth and
Oh
up and
wow.
down with my
Nice.
PS5 controller.
And so is
And
this over like Bluetooth or is it connected with a cable?
so right now I have just implemented the USB connection. So I'm working with the USB, but you
Mhm.
can do that via Bluetooth as well.
Sure. And so is this already a game or is this kind of what you have right now, code-wise at least?
This is what I have like code wise as right now. It's still not a full game. I'm trying to implement some fun stuff like this in here and
Oh
try
wow.
to,
So
extend
all
the
you're shooting.
capabilities.
Nice.
So
Well,
yeah,
you know
still not
what?
a full
Actually, I'm
game.
pretty happy that this. No, but the thing is, your scope is relatively small, which means if we look at the code, we can actually really start to understand it because there isn't that much yet, right? We
True.
can actually fully understand in the scope of this stream what that looks like. I'm pretty
True.
excited by that. So let's say you build something like this. What do you start with? What is the main thing that you need to get going?
Uh, I would say that like two things. The first is now because it's a web HID API that we are using, you need to have a device that uses HID under the hood. So it does not necessarily have to be a game controller. It can you can even remap
Okay.
your whole Mac keyboard because it uses HID under the hood. So it just has to be an HID enabled device
Okay.
for that. You just need that. The other thing is a Chromium based browser. This is still an experimental API.
Hmm.
So not all the browsers support it. I think it's the Chrome and Opera. These are the only browser engines
Opera,
right now that
really?
support this.
Oh, the strictest people on the planet are now actually supporting one of those APIs. I like that. That's cool. And so, in this system, like most games, if like I just when you were offline, I was actually talking about this for a sec. Like there's a game loop, right, in this because
Right.
that's how your animation works. Because it refreshes 60 frames per second or whatever your browser can deal with, I guess. So is that what you've implemented here as well?
Not really. So what you're talking about,
Ah,
you need to do that with the Gamepad API because with the Gamepad API, what happens is you will have to set up a loop which would check if uh, the state of the controller changed or not. But with
mhm.
the Web HID API, what happens is it has an event trigger. So whenever you interact with that, it triggers a function. It runs a trigger, and then based on the inputs, you can then do whatever you want.
So that sounds like it's an easier approach to things. It feels more like
It
an
is.
events
It is.
based system rather than something is always running and you kind of have to hook into that loop and hope it works. Right? That's a different
True.
approach. So, would you like to show some of the code just to see how you got to this point?
Sure. Yeah. Uh, just gonna try to zoom in
Yeah, we
that
need a little bit of
folks.
zoom here, I think. There we go.
Just good enough.
Nice. Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, yeah. Perfect.
And I'm gonna skip the CSS part.
So
Just gonna
lots of
quickly go through
CSS.
the
So
HTML.
this is not a canvas or a WebGL or anything. It's literally just DOM.
Yeah.
Nice. At least when I see this, I know how it works. That helps.
I wanted to keep this demo very simple. I'm also working on kind of a npm package for this so that people can then use it in
Hmm.
React, Vue, whatever framework they want.
Exactly. So this is kind of the base of your getting started system at one point that you will release.
Exactly.
Right.
All right.
All
So
right.
this
So
was the. Sorry, go ahead.
to connect. But no, go for
Yeah.
it. Like I'm just looking at code and starting saying things, but it's better if you present because you actually build it.
So again, this was the first button that we saw when the page loaded. And this allows us, the user, to give the permission to connect or not to the application. And then we have the game where we're simply rendering the sky, the grass, road, and then this, I am assuming, is Mario over here.
Yeah, this looks
Yeah.
like the Mario.png here. Yeah, exactly.
And then I wanted to add sound to this, so I just added a sound over here as well. Now,
Cool.
all the fun stuff is happening in here in the script part. So basic JavaScript till over here. So we just getting all the elements from the DOM, and I've created some couple of states, and I know what keys I want to use. For example, the left tick or the left axis, the right axis. And now
Yeah.
the interesting thing is these axes, they move both in the x-axis and the y-axis as well. It makes it interesting.
Yeah.
And I'll try to also show how the data looks like later on in that game because it's a bit crazy down there as well. And
Yeah,
then
I can imagine when you console log whatever, when you move this, it's pretty crazy, right?
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I'll come to
Yeah.
that. I'll talk a bit more about that, about how the data looks like later on.
Sure.
All right. Over here, I have just added like 4 buttons, but I'm right now only using one button, which is the circle button, which basically shoots that laser. And now we are actually started implementing the Web HID API. So the first thing
Here we
we
go.
need to make sure is check if that API is available in the browser or not. And if it's available, that's when we use that API to request a device. Now, this particular request function, it actually takes a filter. And in this filter, you specify which devices you want the users to connect, right? So if I remove this,
Yeah.
it's going to return me an empty array and I don't get to select a device. So the first challenge was to like get the vendor ID and the product ID for the device. Fortunately, there is a website. Uh, I should have got the link over here, but there is a website. I'll share it later on with you so that you can add it in the description, where folks can find out the vendor ID and the product ID for almost all the HID devices out there. So this can be, let's just say, you if you have a
Oh, that's nice
PS4
because
controller,
exactly. Because this
yeah.
looks like a
So
pretty
you
crazy
can
code. Is there also maybe a list you can filter from?
not really. You have to manually specify which all devices you wanted to connect.
Okay.
That's where it becomes a bit crazy because you don't know what devices your users have. So you're basically limiting your users for this.
Okay.
The
Yeah, that makes sense.
other the other crazy part about this is the data that these devices send are completely different. So let's just say I have a PS5 controller and a PS4 controller. I'll have to map that data based on how they interact with the applications. So
Oh wow,
with this, there is like no standard way how data is communicated.
that's crazy. Why wouldn't that like so imagine you're like a PlayStation developer and you're releasing Call of Duty for 4 and for 5. You have a different implementation of the input device. Isn't that crazy?
It's that's what I've been thinking. That's what I've been trying to understand. Like why? Interesting thing. I because I already have implemented this over USB. I wanted to try it with Bluetooth. I was able to connect the device, but then the data changes when you are using Bluetooth. So the same code does not work for Bluetooth. I need to map that data so that it works for Bluetooth as well.
Holy moly. Okay. Well, there's some lovely content or data mapping exercise in your future there.
True. And that's why I want to have that library which handles everything for me. And I don't have to worry about these things.
Exactly.
All right. So yeah, with the request device, we've passed on the filter, and this filter basically tells like which all devices are allowed to be connected to the application. Once the user says like, "Hey, okay," they allow the device. We get a device array, and then basically I'm just hiding out the button and rendering the game. The other thing is, whenever a device gets connected, you cannot start interacting with the application immediately. You have to open up the connection with the device. And that's what we are doing over here. So even though it's connected, the user cannot use it until unless you open up the connection. And when
All right.
that is there, that's when we can have the on input report function. There's another way to write this function. This can be something like window dot event listener and then have input report, and then you can have the same thing going on in there as well. So what
Awesome.
this function does basically is going to just take in the input coming in from the controller and handle all that.
And so
All right.
essentially, if you move a stick, this is kind of just listening for whatever change is coming. And then you get well, looking at the next line, it's a uint 8. So it's a pretty big number, I guess, or a lot of stuff
Yeah,
coming in.
a lot of stuff
And then
coming
you're
in.
normalizing that somehow. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For this one over here, yeah, I'm normalizing that. I'm also checking the report ID because oftentimes the input might have a report ID. And if there is no report ID, you can use like 0 as the report ID. But this controller gives me a report ID, so it's always good to have a report ID to check, because there are again a lot of
Okay.
security issues that are still not fixed with this API. So it's always good to have this checks in place. But let's see, I normalize it. So now I get the values between -1 to 1 for both my joysticks. And then I do the same for the buttons. And for the buttons, I'm just simply setting the value of true or false.
Oh yeah, and so basically you made your own little state machine on the top where you say the button is
Exactly.
false or true and whatever the X and Y is of the sticks.
Exactly.
Yeah, so for the people watching this, you don't need React or Vue to do this. You can actually just have vanilla JavaScript because why not? It works fine.
Uh, I because you mentioned this, I initially started trying this out with like different kind of frameworks, and I was like, this is more difficult in like those frameworks. I'm just gonna simply do vanilla JavaScript and HTML and just do this.
Exactly, because I'm just now thinking like I'm most proficient with Vue.js. I would want like some sort of state machine to do this, and then everything becomes reactive, and then it actually gets quite slow when you add proxies to this whole mess, right? And it's a lot less easy. And it seems like what you're doing now is you have the async await, you have all the modern stuff you need. I'm kind of excited to see later on how you actually change Mario and what you do for that.
I disclaimer, I am not too good with CSS. So I have like a couple of hacks in there.
And we're happy to see the hacks. That's good.
All right, so let's jump into that because that's the next thing. So in the update position, I'm simply passing on the access, and this is what the code looks like. Let's just go there step by step. So I'm first of all getting the value for Mario. Oh no, I'm basically getting the whole CSS style because when I was working with this, I was trying out on different screen sizes, and I realized I haven't created or I haven't kept responsiveness in mind. So at least when I'm demoing it, it should look decent enough. It should not look like, the screen is only this much while Mario just goes out of the screen as well. So to just take care of those things, I have added a couple of rules in here. As you can see,
Yeah.
the max width over here. And I'm checking the value for left tick over here. So if the left tick X, so it's like the horizontal, yeah. So if the
Yeah,
left
exactly.
stick moves in the horizontal direction, the value changes to 1, and then I am updating the value over here. So I'm going to give you a minute to go through this code and try to understand it, because I also,
Yeah.
yeah.
So initially, when you this update position, when is that fired?
So it's fired every time I interact with the joystick. So sorry, the
Okay, cool.
update position, yeah, it's fired every time I interact with the joystick, but then it checks, if the values are uh, the values fit over here or not.
Exactly. So initially, you just keep the state of your previous state left and top, and then based on certain behavior of the sticks, you just recalculate it based on the previous one.
Yeah.
And so, how are you're replacing PX and all that stuff? There's a few things you can probably do a little easier with the CSS API in JavaScript. But I like the hacking approach, but it might be a bit slow. Global replace with a regex every time you move a stick.
I would love to know that. I've been trying to figure that out. Could not find it. I'm just gonna, yeah, hack stuff around over here and make this work.
You
That
know
would be
what? I
interesting.
wouldn't know by heart right now.
I I think I
But
know what you're talking about, and I did try out a bit of that. I think, but I might not have fully implemented that.
yeah, it's because if you look at style.left, the one on line
Mm,
146, you can probably, that can also probably be a getter, and you probably get it without the PX, for example.
okay. Hmm.
But I'm not entirely sure. But this might not be the moment to change your whole game and figure that out. But I do like your approach because you're basically just you're literally changing CSS properties based on how much you move that stick around, which is really cool. And so, how do you calculate how much the difference is between the previous and the next?
What what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, for example, you have previous x, so you literally get the left
Mm,
value. But then at one
yeah.
point you say left stick x equals, or if it equals 1, do something. But um, after that, the left style that you're giving is again the same previous x, but just 2 pixels more. So is that 2 pixels more? Is that actually your acceleration?
Yeah. So this is like moving it like by 2 pixels.
Aha.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, cool. So
All
if
right.
you wanted to
Okay.
maybe make a variable to see how fast Mario is going, that could also be a variable rather than just 2 pixels.
True. True.
Because a fun feature would be, and now I'm destroying your whole app, but if you go all the way to the right with your, with your thumbstick,
Mm,
you might want to increase that performance value of how fast it can go.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Oh my god, I'm gonna note it down and I'm gonna try
So
to do something with that.
nice, because remember back in the day when we'd have like these car games where you can just go a little bit of gas or a lot, and that's why you have the thumbstick, right? You can do these things. And then you can do some crazy things like figuring out the acceleration delta from 0 to the end, because you can go slow, but you can also go fast. And you might want to do some craziness there.
I'm just noted it down. I'm gonna try it out. It seems like a really
There
good
we go.
idea.
Maybe just put this on GitHub and somebody from our audience will actually give you a pull request.
It's already on GitHub. I'm just gonna quickly try to
Nice.
get the link. But it's already on GitHub. So if someone wants to try it out, they can just go there, fork it, or just run it as well. Right, I'm
Nice.
sharing that with you. Maybe you can later on edit to the notes as well.
Yeah, so I'm just looking back at this drawer I have here, and I know there's a PS4 controller in there. So who knows? Okay, I'm gonna put your link here. I'll put it in the stream.
All right. While you do that,
There
I'm
we
just
go.
gonna go ahead and thank you.
Yes, of course.
Right. So I'm doing the same
All right, so
thing
we
for moving
figured out
it.
the left and the top, right?
Yeah. So that's what is happening with the top as well. And the shoot part is like more ugly than the move position part, because this is like I spent a lot of time to figure this out. It never worked out.
Oh boy.
But I learned a lot of CSS. I learned about request
That's
animation
cool.
frame, which was fun.
Oh yeah, because in my opinion, or at least how I thought this would work, is you have the whole thing in a request animation frame and is recursively loading something. And then
Mm,
the left position of Mario would be basically just a number that is changing every time request animation frame
right.
runs, because it could go to 100 frames per second based on your screen. And so that's a different approach to it. And so whatever you don't actually then listen to the thumbstick, you just listen to a number that comes in 60 times per second.
Mm,
So that would be very
makes
different
sense.
than actually waiting for input and then changing something. So I'm excited that you took it this direction, because this is actually a bit simpler. But now you have to put request animation frame inside of this thing, which then makes it a bit harder because that's supposed to always run. Or this one is just whenever there is a moment the processor
Mm,
has space, it will fire this function, right?
right. Right. So whenever
All
like
right, so let's
you
take
click
us
on
through shooting.
circle, yeah, that works for shooting, right? Because I just want to show it once. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's what is happening with shooting. I know there is a lot of things that can be improved in over here, because every time I'm creating a new element, creating like giving it the class, doing the styling, and then animating it, which I feel like can be improved, but I've never got a chance to do that.
Well, if you think about the CSS and the DOM aspect of this, looking at this with my old school hat on, how I would have done it, I would probably make a shot somewhere already in the DOM that just exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would give it the BOM class already.
Right.
And then use CSS variables for the left and the top calculation stuff. And the only
Mm,
thing you'd have to do when you hit, if circle and something's going to happen, then the only thing is to do is you just change 2 or 3 CSS variables that are on the root
right.
of wherever your game is. And that CSS class will already listen to these. And CSS in JavaScript is a lot more optimized than for that. Because right now you're creating it, let's say you're like bashing the button to shoot all the time. You're creating a new
Mm,
DOM node for the div. You add the class, it has to apply the CSS, but it cannot really apply all the CSS because you're then calculating after applying the CSS. and then
Right.
you append the child. So you're adding the CSS in memory and then adding the child. But then
True.
again, you set opacity after, and then you do a translate. So there's lots of repainting actions going on. In a game like
Mhm.
this is fine. But if you start to do more, I think let's say you do it on your phone, right? It's gonna heat up for sure. I kind of
True.
like it
True.
though.
True. True.
But
Yeah. I
there's
mean,
so many directions you could do this, right? This
exactly.
worked fine.
For a demo, this works fine.
And so oh perfect. And so what is circle here on line 169?
So circle is again like a button that we are getting from the state.
Oh, of course. Of course.
So we check if it's pressed or not, and if it does, we do the shooting thing.
Exactly. Makes sense. And so how do you calculate the speed of of the button or the bomb?
There's no calculation of the speed for that right now. It just
No, so I'm looking
is,
at, you just look at the original left position and then you add 85 to it, and that's the speed essentially. But you add it as a translate.
yeah. So what over here I'm doing right now is because Mario can be at any position, right? So I want to make sure that
Yeah.
the laser actually comes on from where Mario is, right? That's
Mm.
why I have the styling over here. I get Mario's position, then I gave this position to the, I don't know, let's call it laser for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once it starts from that, and then I'm translating its position.
Okay, so this is actually more performant than I thought it would be, because I thought you were calculating the left position for the shooting, but you're actually using a translate for that, which is a lot better.
Yeah. So translate is
Nice.
basically doing the moving part. This is just calculating where Mario is and setting the laser from that position. That's it.
Yeah. And on that line 183, you could even add like an easing, I think. So it starts fast and ends slow or some fun stuff.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
cool, man. This is like, I love to see that you actually went relatively basic, because we're now 30 minutes in. And I guess if you know HTML and CSS and a bit of JavaScript, you understand this thing. So
True.
tell me, why do you need request animation frame here?
Okay. So I created this a month back. I need to refresh my memory. Uh, but basically, what is happening is because I want to add animation to this particular element, and I'm doing it within JavaScript. I think that's why I need to do request animation frame, because again, if you see over here, it's using the transform style,
Mm-hmm.
and with transform, yeah, I need to refresh my whole CSS skills now.
Well, I'm thinking the fact that you use a transform in CSS should be quite optimized. What you can do in CSS is say, this thing will have a transform on it soon. That you can add
Okay.
that as an extra property, and then I don't think you need to request animation frame. I think it should probably work. But to be
Okay.
safe, this works well, because this kind of request animation frame just looks for the first moment that the browser has or the processor has space to just fire it off. So this is the
Hmm.
safest you can be. It's good
All
fun.
right.
I didn't realize I had so many opinions on this. Suddenly I have. It's kind
I
of
love
fun.
that. I love that. Like we got roughly 10 minutes. I want to show the
Yeah,
other
a bit
part
more.
of this, because right
Yeah,
now
exactly.
we're just seeing how, we can receive input, but on the other part, I'm going to try to show how to send input to the controller as well.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to stop this one. I'm going to come to another one. Now, this game I haven't created myself. I just found a
Okay.
repository on GitHub. It is a snake game, uh, spelled on. One live server, is it on? Okay. Yeah. It uses JavaScript. So I was like, why not add a game
Mhm.
controller to this? So it works
Exactly.
kind of in the same way.
Perfect.
I'm gonna do start game over here. And for this, I already just before the live stream I tried out. So right now I'm just using my controller to play the game. And
Oh
I don't know
wow,
if
that
people
works
can see
crazy
this,
good.
but now the LED changes, the color of the LED changes over here when the
Nice.
game ends, and it also rumbles. So I'm kind of giving the
Wow,
user a feedback.
that is super fun.
Let's see if I can find the code for this. So again, it's kind of doing the same things. I have the axis set up over here. Now over here, I'm just
Yeah,
using them, so I did not configure the buttons. Um, Start game, end game. So let's try to find it. Game area. So whenever we do the start game, we connect the device like we saw earlier. We passing on the filter with the request device
yeah,
function. If it's
exactly.
not connected, we throw an error to the user. And then over here, we are simply reusing the functions or the states that are available, just checking for the
Exactly.
values and updating those values.
And so while the snake
Uh,
moves, can you feel it rumble? Is that what you built?
no, I haven't enabled Rumble when the snake moves. I've enabled rumbling when the game ends.
Okay, cool.
And
So I think
this is the place where the output happens for the
cool.
controller. So over here, I have another function. And as I mentioned, the data mapping in this is like very tricky. So I had to try out a lot of different things to actually find the correct configuration. But the
Oh
way
wow.
this works is I need to send out a report ID and then set out some values for different things. Now, because I want to enable Rumble and change the light bar, don't ask me how I found it. It was a lot of trial and experiments with these values. I know the values lie between 0 to FF, that's 0 to 255. I just
Oh
need to
no,
find
that's
out the
crazy.
I just need to find out the correct data point where this actual value lies.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. I forgot this. I'm also
Dude, you're
setting
going.
up the mute.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, you might want to create an npm library just to map these things, so nobody else has to go through that crazy, like
Yeah.
finding something out of like 400 values or something.
Yep. That's as I mentioned, it's still a work in progress because I've almost done with the USB part, but the Bluetooth part is a different story. So I need to do the mapping again with the Bluetooth thing. So
Yeah.
that's still a
Yeah.
bit tricky
Okay.
now. And then for
Oh,
the
but
last 3 bits, sorry.
oh no, I was going to ask what report is, but I can see in line 403 that you're actually just sending a report to the device, and that has like this fun uint8 number in it.
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about data in the web HID API space, we actually use the term report instead of data. And this report is basically like binary data in itself. And in web HID, there are like 3 different kind of reports. The first is the input report that we saw with the Mario game. So whenever you would interact with your controller, it would send out an input report and you can do stuff over there. The next thing that we are looking out right now over here is the output report. So whenever we want to send out some feedback to the user, we use the output report and we use the function send report for that. So that's
Mm,
what we are doing over here. And then there is a third one that is called feature report, which allows you to like both send and receive input and output, which is
Cool.
again a bit complicated to implement. But WebHID already gives you this functions for that. But then the data mapping is a whole different story.
And does a controller like this support like rotation movement and stuff like a switch controller would, or do these not have that?
That's a good question. See, this is it does have that. I know. I remember
Ah.
playing a car racing game where I used to control the car with the controller. So it does have that. Yes. Uh, and it does also like the HID also supports that. The API supports that. But I haven't got a chance to look into that yet.
Mm. It seems like there's a whole world of stuff that we can still figure out here. So maybe as a last thing, can you show like the on input of this to like just console log, just to for people to see whatever comes out of this controller?
Sure. Let me do that with the Mario one because over here I know where exactly the code is.
Yeah, sure.
Hmm. Why server is not
Oh yeah, you might have to
already
restart
running?
your
Yep.
server also.
Says the server is running. Interesting. Okay, yeah.
All right, here we go.
Connecting it over here. And now you can see it's just throwing me like streams of output coming in or the input coming in.
Well, that's a lot. Okay, so what is in this data view exactly?
It's an array buffer. And if you want to look more closely, this is what it kind of looks like.
I have never seen this. I love it. And I have no idea how to read it. This is just crazy.
That's me working with the API.
Oh no, there must be some sort of abstraction on top, like they did with WebGL in 3GS. Right? It has to have something because this is just craziness.
I know.
So they do it in this array buffer because there's just too much data for JavaScript to otherwise parse, I guess.
Yeah, and that's like the kind of a scary part of this because I was going through the security issues with this particular API, and because there is no defined structure for the data, you can send like any kind of data in the binary format, which can harm both your application as well as the device as well. So that's
Hmm.
why a lot of browsers, like for example, Mozilla is not in favor of supporting this right now. They're like, we need to have
Yeah,
proper security implementations for this before we roll it out.
exactly. Well, dude, I want to thank you for showing all this off because I've never seen this. And somehow I thought it would be very easy, but it's clearly not. But I do love the fact that that your code is actually just super down to earth, very simple, and that in the time of this stream, I have now understood how to do this, and
Awesome.
I will probably be able to do that myself. Exciting times.
Love it. I am excited to see what you build with this.
Oh, I just need to find some time and do it. So, is there anything you might want to add finally to our lovely viewers?
I don't have anything in mind, but yeah, if folks, if you are hacking with the WebHID API and if you build something with it, I would love to see because I'm also still learning about the API. So feel free to share it with me. This is me on the internet. I'm
Exactly.
always bad at pointing things.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
but yeah, you can find it on the internet over there. And I would love to see what you have been building with WebHID.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody look at Contentful as well, because that's Herschel's CTA here. Well, not really, but I'll just hand it to you. I know, it's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I'll see you in the next stream. Cheers.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice one.